I forgot to mention this, but another argument that people talk about why you should not ban button binding, macroing, or certain kinds of equipment, so to speak, is because it alienates the greater fighting game audience. Okay, it alienates people when you try to ban all this stuff. Well, as we can see here, Street Fighter V, it goes on to say that the game eventually sold 6.6 million, but I think that's including every version of the game, so that's bullshit. We'll just go by it sold 1.4 million copies. 1.4 million copies of Street Fighter V were sold. Street Fighter V at the biggest tournament ever has 1,000 people. Someone can look it up and they can put it in the comments if they want. Name the biggest fighting game tournament ever. I don't know what the largest amount of entries is for a fighting game ever, but list the biggest fighting game ever and the amount of entries that you had for that fighting game, and show me the percentage of people that entered the biggest fighting game tournament in the world for that year. And tell me the correlation of how many millions of people bought the game. This idea that by banning button binding and macroing, banning certain kinds of equipment hurts the greater fighting game community is not true whatsoever. There is a very, very small portion of people that play video games competitively. There is a very, very small portion of the population of people that play video games competitively for money, and even a lesser amount that are good enough to win. This idea that banning training wheels, in a sense, hurts the greater fighting game community and alienates thousands and thousands and, millions of players, tens of thousands. We can see the biggest fighting game tournament in the world has 1,000 people when your game is selling millions of copies. Your argument, again, as usual, man, people can't have logical arguments about games. It's actually incredible to me if you actually sit down and listen to smart people in the video game community. They can't talk about a video game. They can't even talk about the realm of outside of video game. Do you realize that? Do you realize that people really legitimately, the content creators that you listen to, not saying don't listen to them, do you realize they literally have no idea what they're talking about half the time? Where is the proof? You're alienating the greater fighting game community by banning button binding and macroing, training wheels, so to speak. And when I was talking about, someone was trying to give me shit, I wrote it in the comments, but I guess I can't expect people to read the comments when so many people actually watch my videos, and obviously you can tell they don't watch my videos because they say something I didn't even say in the video. But someone was talking about that they didn't like the example that I used hockey as an example instead of where Aris used a corked bat in baseball. But I'm going to compare this for a second. Corked bats, to my knowledge, you know what I mean, are kind of like training tools. You don't use training tools once you're actually playing for money. It's not fair, right? I mean, believe it or not, even at the highest level, execution errors do happen. No one is 100%. I've showed before, I've had to have surgery on my hands, you know what I mean? I'm sure we have stalkers, they've seen my body, you know what I mean? I got a six pack on and off, I look like I'm muscly, but I don't even lift 50 pounds because with all my health and my health getting worse, my body doesn't work the same. Just like I can't work out the same, I had to teach myself to use different kinds of controllers if I want to still play. Whether you want to believe it or not, me hitting 3 buttons, there is more of an execution error than if I were just to tap one button. Even with as weak as my hands are, okay? Okay? Let's take an FRC for an example. Let's say you hit the FRC, I don't know, 99% of the time. We'll throw out a bullshit number. 99% of the time, right? But let's say because your hands are weak, Clayton, maybe, you know what I mean? Sometimes my hands are just a little weak. oh, I fucked it up. I didn't hit the buttons exactly correctly. And because of my fingers, I'm 90%. Even with my fingers being weak, you cannot fuck up hitting one button, even with a weak finger. With weak hands after having surgery, it is more possible. I'm throwing out like an arbitrary number just, for sake of argument. 99 to 90%. You know what I mean? It's not the same. Button binding and macroing is bullshit. It went from a courtesy to being an abusable fact. These games were not designed for, you know what I mean? The kind of equipment you're using. And that's why I tried to use hockey. You know what I mean? And to go on to the corked bat, let's remember, I don't even use the fucking button binding when I do these combo videos, right? So I don't even have respect for these fucking tech lords who fucking do it in a combo video. But combo video, let's say, is practice. You can use a corked bat. You can use button binding, training wheels, right? You can use your training wheels when you're in training mode doing these fake tech videos, or it could be a real tech video, but you're showing off your fake execution. You know what I mean? Blah, blah. But when you're actually in a competitive endeavor, you should not be allowed to use the training wheels, right? And I used hockey because hockey is an example, if you were smart enough to know what I'm talking about. Hockey is an example of, as the sport was progressing, people are shooting the puck harder, you got bigger, stronger players, blah, 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 right? And so, of course, you know what I mean? Look at back in the day in hockey. Goalies didn't even wear helmets back in the day. Can you imagine? My friend made this joke. Sometimes we talk about, can you believe people back in the day were driving cars and you didn't wear seatbelts? Pre-safety days, you know what I mean? But hockey, you didn't even wear a mask, you know what I mean? And you're the goalie. Insane. Now, obviously, as the game progressed, the sport progressed. Hockey is a real sport, but because we're talking about Street Fighter as a sport, fighting games as a sport, right? As these games have progressed, players getting better and better, well, of course the game is progressing and the equipment is progressing, to an example, right? Goalies started wearing bigger pads and all this kind of stuff, but it got to a point where it's like, wow, the game was not designed for the equipment that you are now using. Using a face mask, whatever, okay, we can see that. That's a courtesy, right? Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Oh, well, I have a courtesy. You don't want to take a puck in the face. Oh, we killed you. Sorry, right? You know what I mean? Oh, God, slap shot right to the face. Oh, shit, man. We better start letting the goalies wear a mask. That's a good idea, But eventually, they took pads to such an extreme degree that they had to start making rules for it because we're like, dude, our sport was not designed with your equipment that you're using. We're playing the same game, but the equipment that you're using, the game was not designed. You can't use that. I don't see why this is so, it's so, like I said, you can't have people, is this like rocket science to you guys? It's like, is this really rocket science? It's not even a complicated conversation. That's why I tried to use hockey, because hockey is an example that you saw. The game was changing, the equipment was changing, but then it eventually got to the players were then abusing the courtesy. Don't kill me. Puck in the face, don't kill me. Right? You know what I mean? Street Fighter, all these older games, they're not designed for the equipment that you're trying to use in it. Button binding and macroing, these were not designed for the stuff you're using it. Execution is a part of games. And people still say, oh, well, they put button binding in games. Who cares? They also put a fucking start button in the game, you fucking idiots. I'm going to press start. I'm going to press start. It's in the game. But what? It's in the game. They press start. I mean, I can't pause. Are you sure? Yeah, start is in the game too. You are allowed to pause in the game. It's not illegal to pause. I mean, what? It's insane to me. I mean, the community, I know you guys are retards. Insane. There's no precedent to believe that you have alienated the entire fighting game community if you start banning certain equipments or certain techniques in a competitive environment, because this competitive environment is so minuscule to the amount of people that actually play. And of course, we can even go back. Look, the Street Fighter 2, the most popular game, one of the most popular video games of all time, not one of the most popular fighting games of all time. And you could say, oh, well, that game has an extra million people that would have never played it anyway. You know what I mean? Because it was just such a cultural sensation. Okay, say you threw us a million people for free. Throw us a million. Throw us 1.5 million, whatever, for free. It's still Street Fighter 2 is not even close. And Street Fighter 2 did not hold your hands to do everything. And guess what? It's still one of the biggest video games of all time. So anyway, I just wanted to show that because I had forgotten to comment on the whole, that the idea that if you ban this stuff, you have alienated the community. And there was absolutely no proof of that. What, you alienated 0.1% of the people that play the game? The end.